Hello, folks. Welcome to season 3 of our On the Call series produced by the Stars Among Us. I am Ozzy, and I thank you for tuning in to this thank you tour of mine, as each episode is a thank you card to someone who has impacted my life. And on this 7th episode of season 3, I am shining light on Jennifer McINTOSH, aka Jenny, aka Mackey. Hello, Jenny.
Hey, hello there, everyone.
Yes, so folks, just so you know, Jenny is part of my childhood from Trinidad. I lived on a street called Elizabeth Avenue, and from where I lived, Jenny lived on the house above our street, off the main road. And Jenny has been an integral part of my life. She is the sister of my early first ever best friend in my life, Cecile McINTOSH, who passed away at an early age. So, one of the major things that stays in my mind is Jenny teaching me to ride a racer bicycle. And I did it on I think it was the first shot. Was it the first shot or the second shot?
I don't remember, but I know you did it very soon, very quickly. You got the hang of it.
Yes.
These wheels had to go, but the pedals would keep going. They don't stop for you to rest or get it. You have to be going up and down and up and down.
Right.
And we're not down a slope, if you remember.
That's right.
Your house was the second house on the street, and it went up a slant slope down to a river. And yep, that's exactly where I learned to ride also. The same way. And then I was riding, and you said, "Teach me to ride." And I did my best, whatever I could as a young kid. But in no time at all, we were sharing a bicycle, your turn, then my turn, down Queen Elizabeth Avenue.
Right.
And then we had to push it back up because it was on a slope.
Right. I forgot that our street was on a slope. So that even then, and that racer, like you said, there was no, how do you call it? You had to actually really ride the pedal, because there was no sort of coasting, right?
Right. And I don't think we had brakes either. We had to maneuver the best we could to stop it.
So, Jen, just to touch on your family. Growing up, I looked up to your family in such a way because it was a large family. There seemed to have been so much camaraderie, closeness. You guys had a band called Blue Jays. There was always music in the house. There's music that spilled over. Everybody seemed to be able to play an instrument. I was in awe of your company. You guys used to kind of give parties and like almost concerts to me.
Yeah, well, they had a lot of parties. My family, my father had his own band, Cecil McINTOSH, and his orchestra. Back in the days of John Buddy Williams and Joey Lewis and older musicians who have all passed on. And yes, most of us had to learn an instrument, or some of the girls took dance. But then there were 7 of us. So the 2 eldest girls, one danced, one did piano. Then there were 3 boys. And I'm not sure if they were formally trained, but they kind of picked up the bass or the bass guitar, a regular acoustic guitar. My father played an upright bass. So yeah, there was always some sounds going on. Some band rehearsing, if it was Pop's band or if it was Blue Jays or if it was whatever Kenny's band was. He played with my father. And over the years, yeah, Casanovas, Kabuki Strings, Group Solo, these were, back in those days, it was like an 8-piece band, guitars, a keyboard, and percussion instruments. More or less, all of those names that I called, they played, they were that type of a group. And many of them did rehearse at the McINTOSH house, because that's what it was, the McINTOSH house.
Right.
And at some point, there was always a fete, which is just a party, but a band would be practicing and then people would be there and that would be it, and it would be an event. So yes, you do remember correctly that there was always some musical activity going on.
Yes. And while that was happening, Cecile, who is your younger sister, and I were best friends, and so we were dancers. So we would both practice at the times when we couldn't be together. So I would practice my class in our porch, our front porch, and she would be on the porch in your house, and we kind of connect dancing together. It was weird, but it was very cool, you know. One of the things that I always wondered about was when the boys, because I was in love with your brothers. You know, at first it was Kenny, then Larry, then Michael. There was something about the boys.
Yeah.
And then the boys disappeared, and only later that I found out they were all in the Army or the Navy. Could you enlighten me on that?
Well, two of them, Kenny and Larry, wanted to be helicopter pilots. And that was just before Vietnam. So my mother, being the type of woman that she was, you want to be a pilot? I know where you can do that for free. So she got our visas and she brought them up and they joined the Army and they both flew. I think Kenny did 1 tour, Larry did 2, and they both flew helicopters. And, you know, Vietnam has had its toll on people in different ways. Some kind of psychological depth, depending on who you were. So yeah, they came up first and they joined the Army, and Michael didn't. He was just before me. He was the third, as you said, in Kenny, Larry, then Michael, then myself. So he didn't leave with them, but he left a few years later when Michael, myself, and Cecile then came. So basically, all the unmarried family members were up here. That
meaning coming migrated from Trinidad to the U.S.
Right.
How was that for you at that time? Do you remember?
Yeah, I remember very vividly because I kind of had a hard time with it. Well, you know, the freedom of the life in Trinidad, especially where we lived. You opened the door, you came outside, there was a mango tree. If you wanted a piece of fruit, we had a cashew tree, we had an almond tree. You shouted to your friend down the street. And then when we came here, we moved into an apartment in East Flatbush in Brooklyn, and it was such a vast difference. You couldn't go outside. We got here in November. So it was that change of weather. We got here and it was gray, and I distinctly remember, you know, it was much easier traveling back in those days. It was much easier with the visas and everything. And you walk out the doors and this place was gray and the trees had no leaves. It was just a bunch of branches, and I was like, what place is this that has no life? Why are all the trees dead? Not understanding that this was just a temporary thing. So that was a big shock to me, to like, okay, I want to go back to where it's hot and green and lush. But it took a while before I could do that. So the first, opening those moving doors and seeing this gray place, I didn't understand that pretty soon it would warm up and it would get green again. That was a shock to me.
It's funny because when I first came up this time by myself in '76, it was in December as well. It was late, so the cold and everything. But I had been through the cold before because we'd lived overseas and stuff, but
Right.
it was still coming to a new country in meeting the weather in that way, when there are fears and concerns involved, things always look really great, feel great. One of the people that I wanted to talk about very briefly is a person that we have in our life called Fly, in Trinidad.
Yeah.
And Fly is sort of our local historian. But I wanted to know, how did he come by the name Fly? Because his name is Michael.
Yes. Michael Solomon is his name.
Right.
And I don't know if you remember, Patrick Solomon was one of our early governor generals or some high-ranking official. He was related to them that way. And they lived further down your street, if you remember.
Right.
Had some sisters.
Right.
He hung out with Kenny, my brother. He hung out with your uncle, Reynald.
Right.
If you remember, Jerry, the people who lived next door to me. As I say, Jerry, I hang out with people, my nieces, who turned out to hang out with Jerry.
Wow.
I walked into the yard and there is what we call Long Jerry. And I was like, oh my God, is the world small or what? But all the boys, in those days, Kenny is about 6 years, maybe 7 years older than I am. So of course the boys are hanging out, and Cecile and I would sit on the step listening. But then suddenly I would hear Jennifer and Cecile go inside. That's because the conversation would get a little bit raunchy, I guess.
Right.
So it was time to get rid of these two little girls listening to their conversations.
Right.
But how Mackey got the name Fly, and you can research this yourself. Dick Tracy, the comic book.
Yeah.
The comic was a strip in the newspaper.
Right.
Had a character, an evil character called Flyface, because the guy had a lot of acne.
Right.
So his skin was bumpy.
That's
right. That was Flyface. And if you remember, Mikey had that same type of skin.
That's right.
And that's where he was first called Flyface. And then it just was reduced to Fly. So that's how he got his name. Not the insect, but the Dick Tracy character. Look it up. Interesting, isn't it?
Yes, after all these years. But this guy, I'd like you to describe, sort of like in a nutshell, what you think of his mental capacity to hold local history, our local history.
Let me say this. There is not a nutshell big enough to hold all the information in Mikey's head. It is remarkable. The detail that he can remember in any event that you have forgotten even happened. Because he will remember the date, the time, the place, everyone who was there, the color of the house, where they went, whose car, the detail that he has, of so many things. This man is in his 80s, but he remembers, I don't know, they were older than I, so he remembers things that I didn't know, because that was, I get older than I, but it's remarkable that he can, he hasn't lost one touch of information. My sister
it's pertinent to our locale in terms of where we live, as well as the Trinidadian history as a whole.
Well, where we lived, and then put it into St. James and Woodbrook, which were just towns further in, more into Port of Spain area.
Right.
The steel bands of the time, the different bands that we were not allowed to participate in steel bands. So being boys, they were, so he can tell you the arrangers, the pan tuners, who played in which band first and went to another band, the families, the Ellie Manette family, the Williams, John Buddy Williams, all the families that were involved in steel band development, the towns they came from. Back in those days, if you remember, there was a lot of warring between the bands. Mm-hmm. If they clashed, there would be a little bit of violence. Mm-hmm. He can tell you all of that, which is why people look down on steel band, because it kind of came from the streets.
Right.
So kind of like hip hop did, it just came, it was people using what they had to express music because all they found was these steel pans left on the beaches by the U.S. Army. And they made a brilliant instrument out of it like we know it now. But before that, we were not allowed to have anything to do with it or people who played the pan because they were not the elitists of our society. So he remembers things that I don't remember or don't know, or explains why something is the way it is because I found it that way, but he could tell you the origin.
And I think I remember you saying at one point it would behoove us or someone to be able to get the information out of his head onto some sort of tape.
Well, yeah, I mean, you should consider a trip to Trinidad with a quality tape recorder and some blank cassettes, and just sit down because it takes nothing for him to start speaking. Right. All you need is a question or a word. Turn on that tape and you can fix dinner and he can continue talking because there's so much. Right. You should consider that and really collect history that people haven't read in a book yet.
Right. Wow. So Jen, now that in the US and you became a teacher, yes. What drew you to that? And was it because mom was a teacher, correct?
Yes.
But was that why you went into teaching?
Not really, but if you remember, both Kay and Ann, my two sisters, are also teachers.
Right.
But back in those days, the fields for women were nursing or teaching. There wasn't much like it is now, where you can be just about anything you want to be. But it also was when we came up here after the civil rights action, I knew I wasn't about to go to jail. But I felt I needed to have some sort of impact on the next generation and their knowledge of bringing out the best in young people. And what I saw in schools here, because I had to do 2 years of high school because I graduated in Trinidad, but I was too young. You have to have working papers to get a job. To go to college, I didn't want to go. I was that rebellious teenager. But I started to say something. Yeah, so I kind of wanted my impact to be to elevate some of these children's minds and attitudes because their standard that I met was a little lower than what I encountered, what I knew in Trinidad.
Right.
Because remember, we went to some of the better schools. So when I found people who could not speak the grammar properly or couldn't spell or whatever, I was like, well, this will be my contribution to the next generation of children of color. So that's why I went into teaching. And then it turned out I went into teaching and I started as a substitute teacher. So at the end of the school year, you're not guaranteed a job. Come back in September. Let's see what we have. And it turned out the only position they had, Ozzy, was a music position. I said, well, God is so good. God is all the years of practice, Jennifer, and going to Miss Roberts for piano and hating to practice and running away. I was well trained and ready to teach music to young kids and sing and move along. Wow. And I did that for quite a few more years, and I had a great time because children love to sing, and it made my job very easy. I went kindergarten and first grade to teaching music through elementary schools. So that's how I ended up there. You never know what's coming your way. Be prepared for everything and anything.
And it's so nice to hear that, especially, from what I remember of your family and music.
Exactly.
To be in that field for most of your life, giving in that way, receiving from the students is a wonderful place to be. Wow.
It was great because there wasn't a day that I really felt, well, I know I didn't hate my job, but people, I hate to go to work. I mean, of course, there were those days where you didn't want to get out of bed, it's cold, etc. But I loved my job. I would go to work every day with a different class. We're going to sing a song. It's Christmas. Oh, it's Easter. Oh, it's the summer. 4th of July. There was always something to sing about. You clap your hands and kids are ready to come up with something by just clapping. And here are the words to some song. Mamacita, ¿Dónde está Santa Claus? I don't know if you remember that.
Yes, I do.
Well, yes. So that I found the music for, and kids loved it because they hadn't heard it. I enjoyed teaching music thoroughly, not a regret. And again, when I told my mother, you never guess what I'm teaching, she could not believe it because I hated practicing and hated going for lessons, which is why I say you never know what's coming your way in life. Don't close any doors. Because had I not had that experience, I may not have had a job for the next year, or I would have just been a classroom teacher. And I did that for a while also, but I enjoyed music much, much more.
What are the other things that you enjoy sort of as hobbies yourself?
Well, you know that I played pan for a while.
Yeah, well, I want you to talk about that.
When we get back into the music.
Yes.
Well, again, in Trinidad, you weren't allowed to play pan. You took piano, and you did your piano different levels until you got to 8. I never got to 8, but I could read and play very well. And you always wanted to play. The first time I heard a Juvenile Morning band in Trinidad, in Port of Spain, it was to me the most amazing thing I had ever heard. But I was not allowed to play. So when I came up here, you meet Trinis and you move along doing what I was doing. I wasn't that much into it, but I met people who were playing pan, and I said I wanted to learn. Oh, come into the pan yard. So I did. And it was quite an experience because it's a different breed of people. Because like I said before, it's from the grassroots.
Right.
And you have to be able to deal with the men
right.
of that level of people. But I always wanted to play it. And then I started to play it again because I had the background. It just seemed so easy. And it was the best thing I ever did to be part of an ensemble. Again, it was even better than teaching. Not even better, but I liked the ensemble-ness. Right. I never wanted to be a solo performer. So I did that every summer for about maybe a little more than 10 years. Wow. I loved it.
With that, did you get to perform on stage with the bands that you learned with?
Yes, Panorama. Every summer with the West Indian Day Parade, they'd have Panorama is a competition of large steel bands. About 60 or 70 players. Now they're up to 100 players. And I played on stage with them, which was nice. But my best time was in the pan yard just playing, because they played, when you practice for the competition, they played the songs very fast because they're competing for excitement and bravado for the crowd to go crazy. When they play in the pan yard, it's just like sweetness and relaxed. The same song, but at a very different tempo. And I liked that. But I did this stage thing a couple of times, but I was much older at that time. The players were younger now, the new groups coming up. So it wasn't like, I didn't have that energy and jump around that they had, because they were now in their 20s. I was in my 40s. So I appreciated the music differently. But another great thing that I did.
So with that, I wanted to let people know that, you've been in my life since my very early years. And even when we have not been together, your family went to the US, my family migrated to England, came back. But whenever we would touch base again, it was like we were in the beginning. However many years separate us, we're back to the beginning. And I remember when I first came up, there were some certain personal situations, and you were right there for me, that I cannot imagine what would have happened if you were not. And I always wanted to be able to say, thank you for being in my life, but also thank you for just being there at those specific times, which were pretty traumatic.
I'm very glad to have been there. And sometimes, we never know what's leading us where or what our role is going to be in someone's life. You think it's just a friendship. And I don't think at the time I kind of really realized what you were going through and what was going on until years later. And somebody says, when this happened, and they explain the background and you realize the depth of what was happening. But you and I have had a friendship from childhood, like you said, 8, 9 years old. And every time we met, it was just like, okay, now we're on to 10, 11. We picked right back up. Even though our lives had gone in different directions, we were able to pick up and fit in non-judgmentally and move forward differently and come back together. You were in the fashion industry, I was in the education, not fields that will come together, but yet still when we met, we were always able to feel good and be happy to see Ozzy.
And me happy to see Jenny. The last time we spent on the beach was just lovely last year.
Yes.
In the midst of this craziness, just to be able to lie on the sand in the sun and spend time with you was just wonderful. I look forward to doing that again. As a matter of fact, look forward to maybe doing it overseas soon, somewhere.
That'd be great.
Claiming it.
Definitely. It's coming.
I wanted to have you on here for a short spell to say thank you, to let you know. Sometimes I don't want this life of mine to pass by without being able to give people in my life that special thank you, other than a card. These are the cards, to each person. And you are such an important person in my life. Whenever I think of you, it brings back all my childhood, and that's like early childhood, and the fun, and your brothers, and your family, and your sisters, and Cecile, who's a dear, still always a dear, she holds a dear part of my heart.
Right.
And then there's Fly and everybody else, So I'm so thankful that you're able to come on this call just to share a little bit. I knew that you were a little bit nervous about the whole thing. And it's just a tidbit of information for me, for people to know also the things that you said, to give people an insight into things like the Panyard,
right.
Fly, brothers and sisters, music, joy. When you're talking about your teaching, that joy that comes through is just so wonderful to hear. Especially now with what's been happening with this past year. I mean, were you to be a teacher right now, how would you feel about that?
I don't know. That's all I can say, because I am not trained. I mean, I can use a computer technology. I've retired. Right. So I don't make the computer part of my daily life the way I would if I was still working. Right. And the way people do, all day on a computer, 8 hours a day.
Right.
So part of me that I noticed by the time I was ready to retire, that the younger teachers, because they were also growing up with technology, they were able to relate to the students better than I was in certain areas. They were not music teachers, but the kids would come into my class and do something on the computer. Okay, Miss McINTOSH, it's ready. Or if I needed something, can you find something? They would do it. And the younger teachers, they taught on the computer. They had the whiteboards. I didn't have that. I had a green board with the staff, the music staff. I had a piano in my room. So it was a different experience. So I'm not sure how it would have gone through. I would have had to have been a little bit more involved in technology.
Right.
I know you can do it, and I would have figured it out because I liked it. But then, music is such a strange thing,
Yes.
So I'm glad that things changed just after I left, and I felt like I was able to do what I did while I was there. I
Right.
don't know what would have happened if I had stayed. I probably would have retired soon after anyway, because it's a different time.
Yeah.
Kids are different. Everything is different, and yeah.
Right.
But I have to say, Ozzy, I thank you so much for this, because I would never have done this. You're the first one of these that I've ever done. And to know that, like you said, it's like to be able to say thank you now and not after life, to say all these wonderful things that a person doesn't get to hear. Everybody else gets to hear it. So it's nice to be able to share and be appreciated and know what you meant to someone and what that person meant to you while you're around, to really understand the development of friendship, the development of personality, pain, joy, whatever it is that makes us who we are, to really understand how that person became and continues to become who they are through everything that life brings. So I got to thank you in turn for that, because you opened my eyes to, different ways of thinking about different things.
Oh my gosh, you're bringing tears. Okay, so for my audience, thank you for spending this valuable time with us today. With myself and my lifelong friend Jenny, more like family. Please care to share, and remember, when you're on your beat, stay on the sunny side of the street safely and mask up. Jen, aka Mackey, thank you again. I appreciate you. I love you. I can't wait to do some traveling with you again. Claim. All right. Until the next time.
Feeling is mutual, and yes, we will make that a reality. We will make it happen, as they say.
Yes.
Things are clearing up, and it's time to move. So thank you, Ozzy.
You're welcome. Thank you. Talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Say bye now.
Yep.
Okay.